On today's episode of Simply Cooking by MmmChef, I turn what is traditionally appetizers into a full-blown meal called Antipasti. Have you ever heard of antipasti? It's typically what's served at the beginning of a very big celebration like a wedding in Italian culture. It's also something that we tend to start big meals with. It's kind of like appetizers, but today I'm going to be doing an antipasti full meal, making some of my nonna's recipes and some of my favorite things to show you guys how you can turn an appetizer into a full-blown meal. First, it's the middle of summer here, so I'm going to start with my favorite summertime beverage. I have some grapefruits here that have been juiced. I'm going to finish juicing. Actually, you know what? No. I'm going to do this in a second because I actually have some eggplant here that's been simmering. I peeled the eggplant and I chopped it up and I have it simmering in this pot probably for a good 10 to 15 minutes. I want my eggplant to get so soft that I can squeeze it and mush it up with my fingers. But since I'm going to be using my hands and it's really hot, that's why I jumped over here, because let's get this strained into this bowl and then we will let this cool while I juice the rest of that grapefruit. What I'm going to be making with these eggplants is a polpette, like an eggplant milanese or something like that. Not really sure the exact words, but it's basically a cooked eggplant patty. So we'll be mixing this with a bunch of ingredients, forming them, and then frying them like little fritters. So while that's cooling, I'll come back over here. I have some grapefruit juice I'm just going to finish. I love fresh grapefruit juice. It is very tart. If you don't like grapefruits, you could certainly use oranges, or a really great substitute here that would be very on brand with the Italian meal would definitely be like a blood orange. It's the middle of summer here, like I said, so oranges are not actually really in season right now. So I was able to find these grapefruits much easier than I didn't see any blood oranges at the store. Beautiful. Okay, so I've got this grapefruit juice here, and I've got some fresh basil. I love the flavor of basil. It's my favorite flavor. If you've seen my show before, you know I use it in a lot of stuff. And nothing better actually than this grapefruit drink with fresh basil. If you are celebrating and want something a little bit elevated, you can certainly add vodka or some white rum, or even some amaretto would be really nice in here. The flavor of the almond with the tart grapefruit actually goes really nicely. I'm gonna put my basil in the bottom of this jar. And then I'm gonna pour my grapefruit juice on top. I'll give this a nice shake. I'll get this setting in the fridge. It's gonna get nice and cold, and the flavor of the basil is gonna go inside the grapefruit juice. And then later on when I serve it, I'll serve it over ice with some sparkling water. Now that that's getting all cold for us, I can start working on my eggplant patties. So today I'm making eggplant fritters, eggplant patties, or polpette, whatever you want to call them. Then I'll also be making arancini. Arancini is the word for basically a risotto ball. So I have some leftover risotto that I'll be mixing and turning into little balls. Traditionally those are fried, but today I'll be baking those. And these are also traditionally fried. I'll be frying those. And then I have some beautiful zucchini flowers from my garden back there that I will be also frying up a little bit later in the show. So I've got my eggplant here. You can see there's a little bit of water on the bottom. So I want to make sure to get that out. A little bit of moisture is okay because we're going to be adding some breadcrumbs to help soak that up. If you don't eat bread or you don't have breadcrumbs on hand, you could certainly use something like maybe a ground flaxseed would really help kind of bind this together, or even an almond flour, an almond meal would work really well. But my Nona's traditional recipe has breadcrumbs because I don't think that in the mountains of Italy she had almond flour or flaxseed meal. I've added a little bit of marinara. I'm adding 2 fresh farm eggs to help hold it together. Again, if you don't eat eggs, this is where you could use something like a chia seed egg, a flaxseed egg, a egg replacement product, or even maybe aquafaba, which is the liquid in a can of chickpeas. So I've got my marinara, I've got my eggplant, I've got 2 eggs. I'm going to grate some fresh garlic. So these are something that my Nona makes, and when I first moved out a long time ago, she used to help me with meal prep, which is kind of like the original meal prep in my life. Is my Nona would send me home with pre-breaded veal cutlets in individually wrapped saran to, you know, fry from frozen, and she would make me these eggplant patties. Same thing, she would fry them up and store them in a Ziploc bag, and I would have them in the freezer and take them out as I needed them, heating them in the oven for a quick prepped dinner. So I picked some fresh oregano and some fresh parsley and some fresh chives from my garden out front. I'm just picking out the little sticks that I didn't notice were in there. Adding this in. And then I'm adding in some Parmigiano Reggiano. All right. And then I am going to mix this up. You can see that the breadcrumb has started to soak up the liquid, but I definitely need to add more because I need these to be able to stick and form together. Now, real quick, I'll form one so that we can see, and then I'll let them sit on the break. And when we come back, you can see what they look like. Let's see if I can get one formed. Oh yeah, I certainly can. See, they hold together really nicely. So I'm gonna get these all formed up, clean up my pot, and get ready, and we'll see you after the break.
Be sure to follow Daniela on Instagram at MmmChef for all the latest posts, including behind-the-scenes looks of the Simply Cooking set and some delicious culinary creations that will definitely make you hungry. And if you've missed an episode, don't worry because we have you covered. You can tune in or set your PVR to one of the rebroadcasts or log on to rogerstv.com/Ottawa or our YouTube page to check out all of our previous seasons and episodes.
So I have my eggplant polpette or patties all formed and ready. I let them sit actually for quite a bit of time so that the breadcrumb could actually solidify. And look at that, they're like really nice and strong. Most Italian nonas all have a different way of doing stuff. Some would traditionally deep fry these or pan fry these, but I like to bake them. So I've got my oven set to 400 and I'm just going to set those in there and allow those to bake while I work on the rest of my stuff. I have some high oleic sunflower oil. I don't typically use seed oils, as you guys know, but when I'm deep frying, I definitely want to use an oil that has a high smoke content, and you can find some good quality unrefined sunflower oils which will work really well for frying. You could also use something like a light olive oil or even an avocado oil would work really well for frying as well. So I have some cooked risotto here. It's leftover from another night, and I'm going to turn these into what are called arancini. Arancini is a fried risotto ball. So I will be frying these, and then I have these beautiful zucchini flowers from my garden, which I will make a quick batter for and fry up for you. So my risotto is cold and really sticky. It's similar to the patties. We're going to add a little bit of marinara. We're going to add 2 eggs. We're going to, just like we did with the eggplant patties, we're going to shred some Parmigiano Reggiano fresh in there. There is already some Parm cheese in there from when I made the risotto itself, but can you really have too much Parm? Probably not. All right, that's good enough. I love to use fresh basil, so I'm going to use this basil as my fresh herb inside these little guys. So I'll give this a quick chop. Okay, so I've got my risotto ball mix happening. I've got my oil heating up. Let's see if I need to add any breadcrumbs. So I also have the breadcrumbs on hand because, again, I don't want this to be too wet and I want the balls to form and hold together. So it does look like I'm going to need a little sprinkle of breadcrumb. Again, this is where you could use flaxseed meal or chia or almond meal or something else to kind of bind it all together. I think I might have just the right amount. Let's see. Yep. So this risotto already has onion and garlic in it from when I prepared it the other night. So it is super flavorful. Never mind all the things that I just added to it. Okay, we'll let that sit there. And now I'm going to make my batter for my zucchini flowers. I've got a little bit of flour in the bottom of my bowl there. This one happens to be a whole grain flour, but you can use any flour that you have on hand. You could also use a cornstarch or a cassava or like a tapioca starch would work really well also. And I have some water. I want this to be kind of like a pancake batter, but maybe a little bit thinner, kind of more like a crepe. I want the zucchini flour to be coated kind of like what you may have heard called a tempura. Tempura is like an Asian fried thing, whereas we do similar stuff in Italian cuisine. It's just not called that. So see, that's the most perfect texture. It's nice and runny. I can see that it's going to coat my flour really nicely. So let's check my oil. I can see all the like ripples in the oil, so that means it's probably enough. And you want to see a trick to knowing when your oil is ready? You get something that has wood. You stick the wood in, and you can see all the little bubbles forming around the wood, like it's frying it, and I can kind of hear it sizzle. That means my oil is perfect for frying. So let's get these going. All right, so you dip that in there, and you want to always drop away from yourself because we don't want the oil to splatter back at me. Looks like it could be a degree or two hotter, so we'll let that guy get going. And I'll just dunk all my flowers in there and get my fingers all messy. All right. Nothing like a zucchini flower fried in the middle of summer. Sometimes in traditional Italian cuisine, or if your flowers have a larger head on them, you can stuff the inside of the flower with some ricotta cheese or even some mascarpone, or I mean, you could get fancy and put a little meatball inside there. But these flowers are kind of baby flowers and they were a little bit small, so I didn't choose to stuff them. Plus, we have so many other great flavors going on. I thought that the simpleness of just the fried batter on the outside would be really nice. So while those are frying, I'm going to form my arancini balls. When I pull these out of the fryer, I'm going to place them on this paper towel, which will soak up all of the extra oil. And then I'll season with some salt and probably eat them right away so that they stay nice and crispy. Let me just see if I can flip them over. Yes, they look and smell delicious. Once these flowers are out of the oil, that's also, I will take them out and then I'll place a risotto ball right in the oil and fry these up. So you guys go to break, and when we come back from the break, I'll have my risotto fried, my flowers fried, and I'll take the eggplant patties out of the oven. See you then.
Food and discussion go hand in hand. Join the conversation on Instagram at MmmChef. Send us your questions. Tell us what you think. Tell us what you like to make. Maybe even send a picture of your own culinary creations. Good food, bringing people together for centuries.
I have my risotto balls that I just finished frying. Look at how beautiful and brown they are. My zucchini flowers are also nice and crispy and just so delicious. There might not be any left for anybody else because I might eat them all. So, so good. Okay, I have my eggplant fritters. Well, they're not fritters because I didn't fry them, but they came out of the oven. They're really hot, but they've held together. The bottom's got nice and brown. Let me open one up. Look how beautiful that is. So I'll plate these here. So over here you see a plate of food that I didn't touch, but this is also part of what we call antipasti. I always have these items on hand or a version of them. I have some homemade bread that my family makes. We have some salami that we make. You guys have heard me talk about this and use this many times. It's a home cured a salami that we make once a year and cure in my Nona's basement. We have some cheese, some fresh tomatoes from the garden, some preserved spicy mushrooms that my Nona makes for me, and some preserved zucchini and green tomato that my stepmom Rafaela makes for me. So I always serve, you know, a version or a combination of some of these every time I'm doing an antipasti night or an antipasti plate. Okay, so we've got our eggplant fritters, our zucchini flowers, our arancini, and now since we're in the middle of the summer, some of my favorite ingredients mixed together has to be this. So I've got some fresh mascarpone cheese. Mascarpone cheese is kind of like an Italian cream cheese, but it's definitely much more decadent, much more thick, and just heaven. So I'm smearing this on. Nothing like the middle of summer for Ontario Niagara peaches. So I've got my bed of mascarpone. Whoop. I've got some fresh Niagara peaches. I'm gonna give these a nice little slice. This can be done with plums. It can be done with pears. It can be done with apple. It could be done with like a fruit compote would be really nice with this. Some cooked down fresh berries to go on top here. But I just love peaches. I have some family coming over in a little while, so thought I would make this spread and we could all have a little antipasti feast outside on the deck in the beautiful sunshine. All right, look at how pretty that is. Again, some fresh basil, because you guys know that basil is my favorite summer flavor. I'm going to take my time and lay the basil out on each other. This way I get some even, nice chiffonade strings. I'll show you. Now that I have them all lined up, I turn and I roll them. Maybe I've done this before, I don't remember. And then I give it a nice little chop, and it's going to give me these beautiful little tendrils of basil. I have some balsamic reduction. If you don't have reduction, you could certainly just use regular balsamic, or you could cook down your regular balsamic in a little pot on the stove for a few minutes. Oh yeah, that looks great. Cover this with the fresh basil tendrils. What else? Definitely want a generous pinch of salt. That sweet, salty, and umami like acidity from the balsamic, and some freshly cracked pepper. And of course, we'll finish it off with a drizzle of extra virgin first press olive oil. Oh yeah, let's pull everything here. We've got our eggplant patties that I'll have to give a taste to. The texture is very meaty. You could actually use these as a replacement for meat in a meal. They actually don't really have that much protein because there's only 2 eggs in the whole batch, but you could increase the protein by adding more eggs, adding more cheese, or you could even substitute the breadcrumbs with something like almond, how I mentioned, because almond flour will have a nice high protein content. Delicious. I'll just leave that there. And we have our fried arancini balls. If you want to be a little bit more fancy and impress your guests, you could take something like a little piece of mozzarella or a little piece of bocconcini, which are the little fresh mozzarella balls that come in water, and you could actually stuff it inside and form the risotto ball around it so that when you open up the risotto ball, you would have melted cheese in there. But these are just as delicious, and too much cheese hurts my tummy, so I decided not to. But I can't resist dipping this in my Nona's marinara and giving it a taste. That's fantastic. All right, I have to try this because this is probably my favorite part out of the whole entire meal. Oh my goodness, that was a jar of my Nona's very spicy marinara. And that's something that happens with her sauce. She gives me sauce, and sometimes you open up a jar and you don't realize that it's spicy. This jar was spicy, but that's okay. All right, take a little piece of peach. You can elevate this by grilling the peaches or searing them, but it's nice and cold and fresh. It's a hot day, so. Wow. I really hope that if of any of these recipes you try, you give this one a go. It's so simple and so delicious. We'll see you next time.